sex and life. And I have had a lot of people recently asking me about how I got into sexual healing, how I got into Tantra. And I have told my story many times in many different ways, and I felt inspired to share on this podcast how I got into sexual healing. Yeah, I think it's just really important to have context where people are coming from and understanding that a lot of people come to this work, come to consciousness through a lot of pain. And I always say that on the other side of our pain is our gift. Our pain is the doorway into our gift. And that certainly is the case for me in sex and relationships. And I will go into my relationship story another time. But my sexuality story is, I grew up very Christian, very religious. I had a wonderful, my family really loved me. And along with that love came the belief that we really needed to believe in Jesus or we were going to go to hell. And part of that is to not have sex before marriage. So on the one hand, I had this very deep belief that, waiting until marriage was the right thing to do. And in fact, that's just what you did. I do remember finding out that my sister had had sex, and she was like, yeah, everyone has sex outside of marriage, because I was taught like sex is just something that happens in marriage. I mean, I you know before the age of, I think, like 11, I had never even encountered the idea or concept that sex happened outside of marriage, even though of course I saw it in the movies and the soap operas and things all the time. But in my innocence, I just really, it was like, oh yeah, it was almost a biological feature was getting married. And so, yeah, I found out, wow, you can have sex. And meanwhile, I was developing into a sexually, like, I felt very sexual, at a young age. And it was also always very healthy. I felt that there was like a healthy excitement and interest in sexuality. Um, so when I was 16, I had like a terrible brace teeth problem. So I had had braces for 2 years. I'd had major surgery, and I was getting my braces off, and I was so excited because I was finally feeling like, oh, maybe I was attractive. Like, this was the first time I had even contemplated that, because I was born with a mouth deformity, and I always was made fun of for the way that I looked all through school. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe there's something about me that is attractive. And of course, when you flip that switch, I went out and like had a boyfriend almost immediately. And so I was dating this guy, and he was very avoidant, and he broke my heart. He just sort of like ghosted me. And I was so heartbroken over this, so deeply devastated. And I then went to, so I then got together with another guy after a few months of heartbreak, probably like, I don't know, a few months later. And I met a guy, and he was the person that I lost my virginity with. And he was a great guy to lose my virginity with. And we had a wonderful time, and we had many sexual experiences, and they were very powerful. I remember having my first orgasm just through penetration. And it was like I was very alive. And it was beautiful, but at some point we broke up. We ended our relationship. I think we were together like 7 months. And then this other guy came around, the one from before, and we started seeing each other again. And just realizing that, my body, and this is part of the relationship story that I'll go into later, but my body was very attracted to unavailable men. And this was like a real trauma for me in my life. So of course, I leave the good boyfriend who was really there for me and really into me, and I go over to the unavailable guy because he's exciting and fun, and he had rejected me, and that was like the most exciting thing. Well, we ended up going to Vail in I grew up in Colorado, and we went to Vail for the 4th of July. It was like a lot of kids were there. And, we were drinking and having a great time. And I ended up hanging out with this guy, and I ended up sleeping with him. And it really did not go down well. I felt immediately ghosted. He was not interested in talking to me or having anything to do with me. And I felt completely devastated that I had once again not, gotten back together with this guy. And I also kind of liked him. And there was a whole bunch of issues in there. And I was so completely devastated by this situation that because I felt like God was punishing me. I felt like this was my punishment for having premarital sex. I'm probably going to go to hell. And, there was so much fear and guilt and shame, on every level going on here. And I prayed to God to take away my orgasms. That I would never be able to have orgasms until I was married, because, I didn't want to go against, myself and against God and this pain that I was in. So I did have sex, but there was something that had literally shut down. I mean, this trauma was very intense, and it's like something shut down. And I went into this space where my yoni, my vagina, it was completely numb, particularly inside, not as much on the outside, but inside it was like there was nothing there. I remember saying that it felt like this. There was no aliveness. And I went on like that for years, including even through my marriage, which I did get married, and we had wonderful lovemaking, actually. But there was something, and things got much better. Like from the beginning to, as we progressed, I opened up a tremendous amount. But there was still something that was not quite alivened. There was something that was still, this inside of my yoni had not awakened. And so after my marriage ended amicably, I got together with another guy, and he had been practicing tantra, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy must be like some kind of stud in bed. I don't know what I'm doing. Something is like not right here for me. So I started studying tantra, and I started studying, this form of sexual healing. And I very deep, powerful tools, and I began making love with my new partner, and I would do all of this healing work that I had learned about through, actually, it wasn't just the Tantra, it was all the healing work. I was like bringing it all into the bedroom and doing all of this deep inner work. And that was really how I opened up my sexuality, was um, practicing during sex, practicing, some of the main tools were things like it was just really about being present and feeling the pain, feeling the trauma, feeling the numbness that was stuck in my body. These places were stuck, and they were creating like barriers to me being in my pleasure. But rather than trying to keep avoiding them, which is what I had been doing, it was like, ooh, there's this trauma. And rather than going in and feeling and melting into the trauma, I was trying to resist it. I didn't want to be. And this is such a common way that, when we're sexually frustrated, when we're sexually insecure, when we're feeling pain within sex, it's like, that's the last place you want to feel pain. That's the last, thing that you would ever want to experience is your pain. But the thing about sexual healing is that's so liberating, is that we can begin to see that our pain is the doorway into our pleasure, and that's both in our sexuality and in our life. So this is really how I began to open up my sexuality, and then studying and practicing. But this is really the main tool and the main gift. And I'm so, thank you for receiving that. And I wanted to just share this and share, inspire anybody out there who's dealing with religious guilt and sexuality. I mean, I can tell you, I know, what's going on in the world and how much religious trauma exists around sexuality. It's massive. It's huge. It's like, there's so much in there. And, with purity culture, and they didn't even call it purity culture. No, sorry. Scratch that last part. With purity culture and with, saving yourself, and God needs you to, really wait for him and wait till you get married, and you're only supposed to have sex within this partnership. And, some people even don't want you to masturbate. And, there's just all these different things, and this is all bound up with this unconditionally loving God who just loves you and wants the best for you, but doesn't want you to explore your sexuality, certainly doesn't want you to be gay, or it's just on and on and on. There's so much programming in religion. So it's important for us to really acknowledge that. And there's also just an infinite amount of sexual trauma in our world. We, of course, have, the Me Too movement, with just so many people experiencing a lack of consent, and us not really understanding as a culture what consent is. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but consent is really feeling that absolute full hell yes in mind, body, spirit, and sex, and then attuning and making sure that someone else feels this fully aligned hell yes. So it's not like, oh, my pussy really wants to have sex. Oh, I guess I just did it again. I just, had sex because, like, well, we were having a good time and I was turned on, and it seemed like a good idea in the moment. This isn't consent. Consent is absolutely, I am a full hell yes to having sex with you, and I am making sure that you are a full hell yes to having sex with me. And when two people can come together and really have this consensual sex, then it's healing and beautiful. But there is so much unconsensual sex, even in relationships, even in, yeah, people who have been together. This stuff happens. And so we have an amazing amount of trauma there. You know, it's an epidemic. And then just being the porn addiction is so huge. It's like these, I had a client recently, and it's just like they are very addicted to porn. And it's so hard to be addicted to porn. It's just like, you know, going from one video to the next, and you can do that all day long. You can get completely wrapped up in porn, and then of course within the porn is very unrealistic version of bodies. It's oftentimes unrealistic. It doesn't really show the healing aspect. It's really it's very much the like sexual. This is just sexual, you know? But there's all this other beautiful yumminess involved with sex that is, it's intimacy, it's feeling, it's embodiment, it's a dance, it's sensual and energetic and kinky. And, you know, all this, there's so much sexual juice, and porn is kind of very much that it's just about the sex, and it's very fast, you know, and it's very intense, and it doesn't really show the deep love making and the sensuality. So, you know, all of this is just like there's rabbit holes upon rabbit holes upon rabbit holes of how deep do you want to go into how much trauma we have and why the human body shuts down the sexual pleasure. Also in relationships, it's like relationships, we're not really taught about the sexuality that is about long-term activation, that is about this long-term like pair bonding relating. So there is a rabbit hole upon rabbit holes upon rabbit holes of how we become traumatized as a society because of not living in a place that is truly sex positive. It was interesting being in the Amazon, deep, deep, deep in the jungle. I went there in 2015 in Peru, and I visited this tribe, and they were just so, it was so beautiful. They had herbal medicines, and they would give them to the daughter from a young age that would keep it, their natural herbal contraceptives, and how beautiful that was to see. And then they would give her the freedom to explore and see if there was anyone that she wanted to have sex with within the tribe. And it was all very safe. It was all very loving. And you could just feel this tribe, the amount of peace they have. And I'm sure there's many reasons why they have a lot of peace, but part of it is certainly because there wasn't this sexual trauma. They were sex positive. Sex was a very natural part of life. They had very herbal, natural herbs and ways to keep them from getting pregnant. And it was just this very beautiful, natural way of being, which of course that, you know, came into the whole tribe. And eventually the kid, as the woman grew up, she got to choose a husband, and then they would generally stay together. But there was this real openness and encouragement to explore. So, there's just so many different ways that people get stuck in trauma that keeps them from their pleasure. And it's not just trauma, it's a lack of real understanding. It's a lack of being inside of the body. It's a lack of really being in tuned with our body, in tuned with ourselves. So I just want everyone out there to know that it is so possible to heal and wake your sexuality up, and know that whatever trauma you may have experienced, whatever way you feel like your body is shut down and you are broken and you are turned off and you feel like there is just something in the way between you and your absolutely epic, most amazing sex ever, then you can absolutely heal that and know that on the other side of that is your pleasure. It is your orgasm. It is your life force. And it is you being a fully alive human, not just in the bedroom, but in every aspect of your life. So thank you so much for being here and receiving my story. I really just felt this deep calling to put this out there. And sending everyone so much love as we follow this path of awakening, which absolutely includes sexual awakening. It's such an important part of life. It's such an important part of being alive. So yes, thank you for joining me on Sacred Intimacy, Conscious Love, Life, and Sex.